about just general Audacity help, and this one guy recommended at the top there's a bar where you can monitor microphone levels, and he says a good level is between -12 and -6. It's kind of a good level to be at.
Would you believe you've done more research into Audacity editing than I ever have? I've never watched a video.
Well, it was about 2.5 minutes long, so it wasn't.
Wait, how do you know if it was a good video? Because YouTube took the dislike system. It could have 1 million dislikes. You would never know.
That's true. What's odd about that is they still have the dislike button. So
yeah,
what's
why
the
even
point
bother? Why
yeah,
have either button?
yeah, if you can't see how many there are, well, yeah, what's the point? But yeah, no, it had some tips, but it didn't really help me with my problem. So, but it had some other stuff. Like apparently you can use Audacity to put a music bed underneath your audio, which I didn't know. I thought that was pretty cool to learn.
Yeah, but mixing is a nightmare because you don't want to have it too loud.
Yeah, but you can adjust it as well. You can adjust the bed sound level too, and like you can practice. You can take audio samples and whatnot, get it to where you want it to be.
You can't see the grimacing face I'm making right now.
I mean, I'm not suggesting we do that.
This is the internet's worst gaming podcast. I'm your host, Loki Jarson. Here with me once again is my good friend, Joe Stizzy. Stizzy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Loki. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. This is probably the fastest we've done a follow-up episode in a very long time. Because over this last month since we've last done a show, you've beaten, 5 games or something? You've just blown through a ton over the weekends.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprising myself on how fast I'm going through these things. It's amazing when you're not playing an MMO how many other games you can get done.
You've taken a little break from Final Fantasy XIV, and you're like, oh my god, there are single-player games?
I know, it's
You can
amazing.
pause?
Going back to my roots.
What have you been playing since we last chatted?
Well, I think about not too long after we recorded our last show about a month ago, I ended up finishing up the Outer Wilds, and that was a good game. It
Worlds.
was Outer Worlds, excuse me, Outer Wilds. Still doing that every now and then.
Well, they released a game called The Outer Wilds, and it's about space exploration, kinda, and it's actually not bad. I played it on Game Pass, but it's a first-person physics-based thing, but it's called that. The name is just default. They should have picked a different name.
Yeah.
Whoever published Outer Worlds should have sued them. Private Division?
I can't remember it, and they came around around the same time as well, so that added to the confusion. But it was good. It was good. We've talked before about it. It didn't really offer anything new that I haven't played before in an RPG, specifically a Fallout or a Bethesda type game.
Specifically New Vegas, because it is made by Obsidian, the people who made New Vegas.
Yes, and I've liked a lot of their games, and I really loved New Vegas. But I've always thought it got a little more, attention on the internet. But
I will forever sing the praises of Alpha Protocol. But go on.
yeah, no, I've heard that's kind of a hidden gem, and maybe one day I'll get into it. But Outer Worlds was good. I liked the overall setting. I thought it had a lot more color than I expected. I felt like they kind of wanted to differentiate with Fallout in that regard, at least with 3 in New Vegas. 4 had color. The graphics were decent. I mean, this is a 2018 game, so I wasn't expecting as much, that much. But And
The key difference being if you're playing it on your PlayStation 5, it loads a shitload faster than it did years ago. Trust me on that.
yeah, yeah, told me about that, and that's didn't really count on that, but I'm glad I waited. But and it had a pretty in-depth progression system where you can micromanage all your skills, and they're broken up into categories, and I like that because I had already decided I wanted to be kind of a smooth talking gunslinger,
Mhm.
and it was good to be able to allocate all my points into just the skills I wanted.
Yeah, it is a hardcore RPG in terms of like stat management and gear repair and weight management and resistances and strengths.
Right, right, and the implementation of skills in social settings like conversations and
Mhm.
whatnot, and there's skill checks throughout the game, and most of them are just kind of nice little bonuses. Sort of,
Mhm.
you can do things slightly different. The end goal is still the same, but it's nice to have.
Every game says you can play how you want, but this one gets pretty close.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you can if you're melee build, you can usually intimidate most people, or if you're a science build, you can keep up with the nerds and do hack into computers and all that. And
Mhm.
so that it is nice to have that sort of freedom. And the companions were okay. Uh,
Certainly there.
yeah, they were certainly there. They were I don't think I wouldn't put them at the obviously the levels like Bioware companions or even other Fallout game companions, but I think my favorite was probably Ellie, just because she was the funniest. She had an extremely dry sense of humor and just a
Mhm.
don't give a shit attitude, so that always created some memorable.
It isn't. It isn't a cowboy western in space, rather, but it kind of is in a little ways. You sort of your character isn't an outlaw, but you meet a lot of them. So that whole outlaw attitude, we'll say she has certainly uh, vibes with the whole aesthetic they're going for.
Yeah, the game definitely does give off that vibe, especially with a lot of the soundtrack tracks will have a kind of a Western style acoustic guitar riffs,
Mhm.
which were honestly my favorite. I really like those. I always expected a tumbleweed to be blowing in front of me every time I heard one. And you also get a robot companion as well, Sam. But he doesn't really, you don't really interact with him too much. I think you maybe have two dialogue options, and
Yeah,
one of them is to tell him to shut off or something. But he's funny. His in combat dialogue is amusing. He's very reminiscent of Liberty Prime if he was just kind of thrown into
well,
a
he's a cleaning robot, so
yeah
he's all about like fighting stains, but the stains are your enemies.
yeah. I think my comparison is he's Liberty Prime if he was made by Clorox.
Yes.
Yeah, he was just one big ad campaign going around melting your enemies. Combat was good in it. It was kind of it was similar to Fallout 4. It was
Yep.
solid. Guns felt like they had pretty good impact and all that. I didn't have a like I said I didn't have a melee build, so I couldn't really judge how the melee weapons felt. But I the what little I did use of them, they didn't feel as polished as the gunplay, which is expected. But
Well, I think the key difference is I nearly 100% of this game. The only reason I didn't is because you'd have to beat it on the hardest difficulty, and I don't want to. But I did everything else in it. And the trade off is okay, with a gun, regardless of the kind of gun it is, you're safer, sort of, because you can move around and not be in range of enemies with guns, but you're less likely to hit. And with the big swords and the big melee weapons, it's like you're going to hit him, but you're going to get hit too.
yeah, I'm really glad I didn't go with a melee build when I went to uh, I'm blanking on the names, but it's the planet. It's the planet with the two factions that used to be
Monarch.
friends. Monarch, that's it. Yeah, because it's got a ton of just alien creatures running around, and they do a shit ton of damage to you if they get
Mm-hmm.
close to you. So yeah, when I went there, I thought, man, I'm so glad I did not go melee because I probably would be stuck here for a while. I actually was stuck for a bit, but I was able to go to the town, do some side quests, level up a bit, and get some new weapons, and soon became overpowered. And then the rest of the game was just kind of
Yeah, take
no
that,
problem.
bugs.
Damn you, weird mantis spider things. Overall, it was I liked it a lot. It was, like I said, it kind of was if I had to describe it, it was kind of a jack of all trades kind of game. I don't think I'll remember one single thing being outstanding, but it had a lot of good things.
Sometimes that's all you need, really. Not every game needs to be AAA banger.
Yeah. I kind of liked how the story itself, even though it takes place within a huge, I guess it's a galaxy. They keep calling it a colony, but it kind of spans over a solar system.
It's really like 5 planets that you actually visit.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot. When you look at the quote unquote world map, the galaxy map, there's a bunch of places, but you don't really go to them, or some of them are just one little area that take 10 minutes to go through. So, but I liked how just kind of how insular the story was. It was basically you're just trying to save these other colonists that are in cryo freeze, because this guy wakes you up to help him out, and that's pretty much it. And you do get tangled up in other bigger factions and issues and all that, but
there's not like a major crisis going on like in, say, Mass Effect or something.
what? Yeah, the quote unquote crisis is that the solar system, the colony, cannot support inhabitants from Earth. They just can't grow any food.
I know, but
that
that's not going to happen like within the next week. That's going to happen in a couple of years down the line, and you're not going to be playing that same story.
Yeah, that's why I put crisis in parentheses, which is,
I see.
You can't really do that in podcasts. But yeah, that's basically, it's just trying to save the other colonists, and you can do that, or you can say fuck them, drive them into the sun, all that good stuff. So I liked it how it wasn't just this existential threat coming to threaten everybody, and you're the only one who could stop it, all that. So it was a solid game, but
a very good game that falls short of being great in ways that are kind of important.
Yes, and I think it was a perfect Obsidian game. I've always thought their reputation's a tad overrated on the internet, but I don't go so far as say they make bad games. I think they make good games. So, but I played another space game, though a little more recent, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, before that, let's say before the movie by James Gunn, 2014, however long ago it was. Before the movie, did you have any headspace about who the Guardians were? Because I've read Marvel comics basically not my whole life, but a large portion of my life, and I only tangentially kind of knew about them through the Lego Marvel games.
I think I was probably the same way. I'd be lying if I said I for sure knew about them. And it might be one of those things I'm just retroactively thinking in my head that I knew about them before 2014, which I believe is when the movie came out. But I probably didn't. That was probably my first exposure to them.
So the movies come out and they give Marvel Marvel Cinematic Universe an opportunity to do their more weird shit, which they continue to do weird shit to this day. The first movie was really great. The second movie was not as good, but still pretty good. And then they had, sometime after that, they had a Telltale series game back when the first run of Telltale series games, where it was episodic. And they had, different art style, the same core characters of the 5 Guardians, but they had different art styles and obviously different voice acting because you're not going to get the movie stars in the game. So I think it was E3 or sometime in 2021 last year when they said, hey, we're making this game, and Square Enix put a lot of money into it. And it's like, well, I didn't even know this was happening, first of all. And there was a lot of, I don't want to say bad blood, but certainly bile on the internet about the Avengers game, which my brother and I have talked about in a previous episode. So when this one comes around, again, with a different art style and different voice cast, we've had, at this point, a video game series and a movie series and a cartoon series even, with the Guardians. So coming into it, what were your expectations before you even played it?
I pretty much expected it to be like the movies, just with the kind of the same chemistry with the team members and the same kind of humor. Um, but obviously I kind of expected it to also be like Telltale, which also takes a lot of inspiration from the movies, but they also
Hmm.
kind of put their own little spin on the characters and try to make them a little more faithful to the comics instead of just being a straight ripoff of the Marvel movies.
Hmm.
But it was a lot of fun. It was kind of a this is kind of a cliche, but it's a wild ride. The game is, and it's one of the most linear, straightforward games I've ever played. But
But it goes up and down. There are emotional highs and lows throughout.
yes, and I think it bogs down a little bit in the middle. There are certain story elements and plot twists that I think are a little contrived, and I think took a little too much, just kind of took a little bit too much from a comic book story because comics are all about cliffhangers and just sudden plot pivots.
Yes.
And I don't, and in a video game, it's a different medium, so I don't think you really have to tell your story that way because you don't have to get too deep into the story, but like when you first meet the antagonist, Raker, I think his name is.
Hmm.
I can't
Yes.
Father Raker. I can't remember his full title.
This is
He's
not going to be an episode where we remember things. It's okay.
yeah. He he's just kind of he's being detained by the Nova Corps, and you don't even see him. You just see him like when you're walking around, not even in a cutscene or anything. He's just some throwaway character. And then the next thing you know, a couple hours later, he's got this huge mining ship and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of followers, and he's got all this power, and you're just thinking, okay, how did we get from A to B? Because it feels like we just went over to B and we got to M or O or R or whatever. It's just
Well, it's not explained in that moment, but I can explain it. Like it's later explained in the game that it's like, oh hey, it's an Infinity Stone. We can just hand wave away any problems. They're magic. They don't gotta explain shit.
yeah. They find it on I think in the quarantine zone and that
Yes.
weird I don't know what you call it the black disc monster or whatever that was a part of
Yes.
Adam or
Fuzzy
something.
Snake. Yeah.
Yeah, the big furry fuzzy snake. So, but other than that, yeah, I think it like I said, the middle just kind of gets down a little bit, but then it picks right back up, and I think overall it was yeah, but it was a pretty solid story. It was
Hmm.
kind of
It's an interesting departure because the team that made it is basically the same team that made one of our favorite games of the last generation, Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. So completely different assets for everything, and doesn't in any way play the same. But it's nice to see that a team that can make a first-person, mostly stealth game, come out with a third-person frenetic action game where you're constantly moving or constantly doing something.
mm, yeah. I think I thought that I think we talked about that a little bit with some other studios like that that have made games that are just completely different from each other, and I think that's a sign that those are good studios. They know what they're doing,
Hmm.
and you may not always like what they come out, but you know they're gonna work really hard on them and make them they're gonna play pretty well. And this one
Hmm.
actually did uh, play very well. When I first when they first announced this game and they were showing a trailer, I it was probably on a PlayStation Access show, and they just showed the player controlling Star Lord, and he's got his pistols and his boot jets and all that, and they show he directs all the Guardians and whatnot. I was actually a little disappointed because I had played Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 3 just this past year, and that is has a ton of characters that you can play as anybody.
Hmm.
And that's probably not a fair comparison to make because they
Well,
are
okay.
two very good.
Here's another comparison of the Avengers game.
Yeah, that's another one that's probably better. It's a similar. It's a third person action beat 'em up, but it's a smaller player roster but
Hmm.
you can still play as anybody you want.
And in the old, I was saying for the Avengers thing of in terms of like you have a team, but you can also control any one of them at any time. For Ultimate Alliance, not for Avengers. In Avengers, you pick one and stick with it until you switch. But so yeah, when you're like, okay, you control Star Lord and you just order the Guardians to do things, it feels very like it's like, well, that's an odd choice, but in playing, it works out fine.
No, yeah, and there are times that I'm kind of glad you can't switch between characters because it gets hectic enough just being Star Lord and just being the commander and directing all the other Guardians in combat. It goes
There is a lot going on every fight.
yeah, and it's one of those very very rare games where the main character, the one you control, is does pretty good damage. You can you can kill a lot of enemies with Star Lord, but the main bulk of the kills are going to come from the other Guardians and how you synergize their abilities and
Mhm.
you know using certain attacks against certain types of enemies and like building up stagger bars or using AOE's and all that. So
Mhm.
you're gonna get most of your kills from your other Guardians, namely Drax and Rocket. It always seemed like those two had the highest kill counts.
According to their again battle callouts.
Yeah, that there's so much there's a lot of dialogue, but
There's a lot of dialogue.
there's almost not enough because it doesn't take long for lines to start repeating in this game in
It
combat.
also in the areas where you're walking around, doing exploring or little minor platforming, they'll have side conversations, as made famous by Dragon Age team, and you're like, oh, this is an interesting conversation. Whoops, I stepped one step too far. The conversation is suddenly over. We're on to the next thing.
Yeah, I there was a ton of times where yeah, the banter just got cut off and I would be pissed because I would be so into it. I want to
Yeah,
hear what the rest of what they're talking about because they got the Guardians have something to say about everything in this game. It's just wherever you're walking. Hey, look, there's a rock. Look, there's water. Oh, don't go there, Rocket. Oh, look, Drax is acting like an idiot again. What a surprise! And a lot of the banter is really well done, and I think the voice actors had pretty good chemistry with each other. You
mm-hmm.
could tell that they really enjoyed what they were doing, and I had some some of them were better than others. I think uh, I think I talked to you about this, but Star Lord's and Rocket's voices took me a little bit to get into. I thought Rocket's voice was a little too deep for just being a tiny raccoon,
Mm-hmm.
and Star Lord's voice and personality was just kind of it was a little too frat boyish. Uh, I guess compared
We
to
said at the
Chris
beginning of
Pratt's.
this. I know. We said at the beginning of this we didn't. It's not the movie, but you can't help. Your first exposure is the movie. If this were the other way around, you were thinking, "Oh man, he doesn't act like he did in the game at all," because your first exposure is what you remember. That's a short-term nostalgia, basically.
Yeah, and I understand Square Enix's desire to kind of differentiate themselves from the movies, and that's fine. That's good. That's what I would do if I
Mm-hmm.
was a developer. But I also think it kind of hurts them because like us, a lot of people probably didn't know who the Guardians were until the movies, and that's their only consumption of the Guardians, and a lot of them aren't going to read the comics, so they may not be some familiar with some author's take on the Guardians, or some they may have a different background or different powers. Specifically, Mantis. The character Mantis. This is probably the most annoying version of her I've seen. And
It yeah, in the movie, this is only in the second movie, and then that later Avengers, she's kind of nebbish, very shy person. And doesn't speak a heck of a lot, but is mostly there for comedic relief. Let's be honest.
Hmm.
But in the video game Guardians of the Galaxy, she's Valley Girl. She says everything your typical '90s Valley Girl would say without saying the word like all the time. She's a chatterbox constantly, and it's like, okay, for me, she definitely teetered on the edge of annoying. I don't know that I ever hated her, but it's like, whew, I'm glad you're not on our ship.
I went back and forth. I found her annoying, and then I found her slightly amusing, and then she went back to annoying again, and I think she stayed that way for me for the rest of the game, where she did come back onto the ship.
Yeah, she's there for a while. Yeah, I was way more annoyed by fucking what's his name? Not Adam Nova. What's
Uh,
his name?
oh, Adam Warlock.
Adam Warlock. I can never remember that last name. I always call him Adam Nova. Yeah, I was way more annoyed by Adam Warlock. I wanted to punch that fucker.
Yeah, no, he was he was extremely annoying and arrogant, which is the point.
I guess.
But I
Congratulations, you succeeded.
yeah, yeah. Well, but I think the whole thing is they create his character to be that annoying so that it's funnier when the Guardians give him shit and make fun of him for it, which
Like,
it was amusing, especially when they were making fun of his alliteration tick.
yeah, I wish I could. I should I could quick enough in the brain to do my own, but I can't. Uh, you hear us talking all this shit about the dialogue. It's an incredibly emotional game. Like, there's a lot of hilarious bits, but there's also some really, I don't want to say dark themes, but like deep stuff about
Hmm.
loss and family and shit. Like, stuff the movies kind of goes over, but this game goes hard into. In terms of like grief, dealing, just straight up the idea of dealing with losing someone.
Yeah, that's another thing. Even though this game has the Marvel's logo on it, it's not like the movies where the movies have to. It's almost like it's built in their contract that they have to have so many jokes per scene in a Marvel's movies. Whereas
Well, it's
this
a
game,
2 hour film. We gotta go. This is a 20-hour game.
yeah, and the Marvel movies, the superhero movies have that style. They've kind of built up that reputation of being mostly humorous and lighthearted and whatnot. And this game is very funny and very very lighthearted and doesn't take itself too seriously in a lot of places. But you're right, there's some really really heavy moments in this game. I think most notably that stands out to me was when you're when you go on the Church of Universal Truth, whatever they're called, their mining
Mm.
ship, and you meet the matriarch, and it's actually Nikki, and you get taken to this dream world, and it's Nikki she's preparing for her mom's birthday, and you're all, and Star Lord's there, and you're all this one big happy family, and Star Lord at first buys it, but then he starts to realize, okay, something's off with this, and then you get that same scene later in the game, and Star Lord from the get go knows that it's all wrong, and his interactions with items, things in the dream world are totally different than the first time around.
Mm.
Because he's berating himself, thinking, "How can I be so stupid to have bought this the first time? This is not who Nikki or who uh, Corel were as people. This no way this would have happened." And he tries to snap Nikki out of it, and yeah, it's just you really feel her sadness and her desperation to get her mom back, and I couldn't help but feel really really bad for her, even though you knew Star Lord was doing the right thing and getting her out of
Mm.
this, and just because she was just trapped in this forever dreamlike state, and but yeah, that hit heavy.
For me, frankly, I think the Drax's stuff hit a little bit harder because
Oh yeah.
let's be 100% real here. This is all fake. These are all video games. It's written by people. But Nikki is like a 12 or 14-year-old girl, and when anyone from that age group, regardless of gender, speaks, it's like, shut up, kid. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You have no idea. But I guess that's the problem of growing up, I guess.
Well, I mean, losing a parent is hard for any age, but I think especially for someone that young and in a fantasy universe where it's just like there's always there's an evil entity always willing to take advantage of it, and it just makes things even worse because it was just incredibly traumatic for her. But you're right, Drax's stuff was also hit heavy because maybe I'm just a little bit older, and even though I don't have a wife and kids or anything like that, that Drax's character, obviously that's a big part of his story,
It's
is the
basically
loss of
what
his wife
what
and child.
defines all of his actions.
Yeah, and it's what was really interesting about his story is throughout the game you get these little hints that Thanos is dead and that Drax is the one that killed him. But then every time Star Lord tries to bring it up, he just Drax kind of dismisses it and just gets this really uncharacteristically, serious look and goes quiet and whatnot. And it was kind of fun, interesting exploring that because that's also the other part of his character is vengeance on Thanos for killing his family.
Hmm.
So I thought it was really delved into some uncharted waters, at least for me, as someone who doesn't consume a lot of Guardians content. That was really really cool to see. I liked honestly I really liked a lot of just the banter you'd get when you would find an item out in the game, the levels, and you go back to the ship and you
Oh,
would
sure.
look at it, and the whoever the guardians room you're in, they would come in and start talking about what you picked up and their past and all that, and that was all really really good, really good. And that also, those were the most serious conversations in the game,
Oh yeah,
some of them,
sure.
and there was really there was a little humor to them, but most of them were just kind of delving into some of the
Well,
darker parts of the
two
past.
two of them were like created to be weapons. So there's that. One of them had a family that was taken from him. One is a tree, so you have no idea what the fuck he's feeling. And another one was also sort of taken from family. Well, it had family taken, then taken from family. So there's a lot. The point of the films also, and the Telltale game, and this game is that just because they're not all of the same bloodline doesn't mean they're not family. They all there are a couple of bits just like in the films that are like Rocket just being an asshole for no reason other than to be an asshole,
Hmm.
so we can have them come back together later. And I would just like to skip that part.
Yeah,
So, because I know they're gonna fucking get back together later. It's like we don't need this dumb fight. There's so many moments in that game. I love the game. It's 5 out of 5 stars for sure. But there's so many moments where Rocket specifically says or does something stupid. I'm like, what are you? There's no reason for you to be doing this other than to be a dick. It's like you get off on being a huge asshole to everyone. That's the only reason to do this.
yeah, it kind of goes against his character because he is the smartest of the guardians.
Mm.
I guess maybe just from a technical standpoint, I guess intelligence doesn't automatically equal emotional maturity or whatnot, because
Sure fucking does it.
yeah, he will just do dumb things almost out of spite just to piss off Star Lord, and
Yeah.
it'd be nice. Yeah, like you said, it'd be nice to skip over that stuff, but luckily it wasn't too bad in this game. Didn't last too long, but it was still
Mm.
there. Um, Also another standout of this game, uh, unsurprisingly, was the soundtrack. I thought they had a
Yes, they take a lot of cues from the movies, whereas like here's the '60s. I think the movie was mostly '60s and '70s soundtrack.
mm,
Uh, the game Guardians goes all '80s all the time, and there's some real bangers in there and some real fucking garbage.
yeah. I kind of wish they had added some more 60s and 70s in there, but I think for the most part it is pretty solid top to bottom, and I like the way they implemented it in the huddle mechanic in the game,
Mhm.
where if those of you listening don't know, it's it's this power up in battle that you activate, and everybody, it's this special screen, all the guardians come together, huddle up, and they'll start talking about the battle, what if it's going well, or they're having their doubts, or they don't think they're going
It's
to
like
win.
it's the key, the difference between we're kicking ass out there and we're getting our ass kicked out there.
Yeah, and you as Star Lord have to pick between two dialogue options to pump them up and get them super charged up, and they can makes they do more damage, and their ability cooldown times are a lot shorter,
Yes.
and just basically makes the rest of the fight real easy. And when you activate huddle afterwards, I think it maybe only if you get it right. I never got one wrong. But after the huddle, a sound from the playlist, the soundtrack will play. Usually one of those '80s tunes,
Hmm.
or a song from the game specific game created Star-Lord band, which was mostly just kind of '80s metal, and weren't bad,
Mm,
but
it's all power rock, yeah.
yeah. But and a lot of them, a lot of the songs that would play after the huddle were great, and they would get you pumped up. But then you get some like "Don't Worry, Be Happy" would start playing,
Yeah,
and you just got this guy whistling while you know Drax is tearing up the battlefield and rockets exploding everything in sight. It just didn't really fit with most of the fights, so that was kind of odd. They really should have.
I got very unlucky. I think in a row for three huddles I had, this might be the wrong order, but I know I had "Don't Worry, Be Happy," "We Built This City" by Starship, and
Terrible song.
the fucking Rickroll song with "Never Gonna Give You Up" was on there.
That's a good song, but also yeah, not a fight song. And I got now this feature did create one of the most memorable moments in the game for me, where when you're helping out Drax get over his brainwashing because he misses his family, you go into his head and you start fighting Thanos, or the memory of Thanos,
Hmm.
and after a while he starts multiplying and it seems like he's endless. So naturally I activated huddle and got everybody psyched up, and so it'd make the fight easier. And the song that played was "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go." So I'm fighting an army of Thanos, and Wham is playing in the background, and oh, I had to pause the game for a second because I was howling.
That was great timing.
It was fantastic. It was just totally totally serendipitous. It wasn't even scripted or anything.
Yeah. As far as I know, those sound cues are random.
Yeah, I believe so. It feels like it, but I think they do. I think they really should have kind of limited the what specific songs play during battle, because, like we said, some are less
Oh,
fitting than
yeah, some
others.
really suck.
Yeah. Uh, I uh, I had some bugs during this game.
I did too.
Nothing too bad. I had one actually pertaining to the huddle where they, after their dialogue, it just the options, the dialogue options for Star Lord never popped up.
Oh, I
So,
didn't have that.
so it was just the Guardians just staring there looking at me at my screen, and they did that for 2 minutes before I restarted the game. So that was kind of amusing. Most of them were kind of funny.
Do you remember later in that same Drax head? You go to like, well, it's not in Drax head, but on that same planet. You go into like a fog bank, and then one of them, I think Gamora says, "I hear this monster," and Rocket will say, "I hear this monster." And then you pick, and the whole gag is to not pick because it's a hallucination.
Hmm. Yeah, that's like one of the few times in the game where saying nothing is actually beneficial.
Yes, and I don't remember how far along I got into it until I figured it out. I was like, "Oh, dummy, don't pick anything. It's gonna be whatever you say." Obviously, I think I was skipping past dialogue at that point, or I'd reload check. I don't know what happened, but basically nothing happened. No one was talking, and I could run around. You know, I could push people out of the way. I could shoot the guns, but I couldn't progress anything. So I had to I had to reload checkpoint, but it took me all the way from the beginning of those fucking caves. And that was the only really major thing. The other shit is like, I fell off a cliff, or I got stuck in scenery. I was like, you know, what are you gonna do? It's a modern video game.
Yeah, the checkpoints were either really really generous, or you'd have to play like 5 or 6 minutes before you get to the point where you had to stop, you had to restart.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had one I had another bug I had a bug similar to that where Groot just wasn't talking. Ironically, the guy you can't understand, he wasn't saying anything, and the only reason I discovered it is everybody in he wouldn't say anything when I would activate one of his skills, and other characters would be talking to him, and there would be a pause where his response would be, and then the character would start. Usually, Rocket would be talking like they're having a conversation back and
As if he
forth.
had translated, yeah.
Yeah, and I had the very cheesy when I just finally realized that what was happening. I had the cheesy dad joke in my head that you could say Groot lost his bark, but my favorite,
Oh, okay.
yeah, because he's a tree. See,
Mm.
my favorite bug though was when I was on the one time I was on the ship about halfway through the game, and for some reason Drax just started following me around everywhere I went in the ship. And at first I thought it was part of the game because I thought, okay, this kind of seems like something Drax would do when maybe he's trying to get Star-Lord's attention and or something. I don't know. But it was funny because when he was as he was following me, I went into the I guess it's the engine room. I don't know. It's one of those rooms with the like the I don't know what it's the red room with the monitor at the end.
Yeah, sure.
And
The thing with nothing in it, basically, yeah.
yeah, pretty much. And Rocket was in there, and Star Lord was talking to him, and Rocket was just kind of hesitant to say anything. And Star Lord said, "Hey, man, don't worry, it's just us in here." Meanwhile, Drax is literally an inch behind Star Lord. I recorded a video. I'll have to send it to you. It was hilarious, but other than that, nothing too bad on the bugs glitches front. But
I would go so far as to call it a great game. We had technical limitations here and there, and the story hiccups. It's not perfect. Nothing is, but I had a heck of a time with it. I really enjoyed every bit I had. It was great to play and a great story, and that's what you want from your top tier games.
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was like I said. I kind of had my issues with just some of the plot conveniences and twist. Another blatant one in my head was when when Mantis shows up with Lady Hellbender at the ice planet when you're fighting Fing Fang Foom, the big
Mm.
dragon. And I'm thinking, okay, last time we saw Mantis, she was back on her home planet trying to help people evacuate because excuse me, the Church of Universal Truth had showed up and they were starting to convert people and yada yada. And I thought, okay, how did they even cross paths with each other? And I, I want to say it might have explained it in game, like just some throwaway dialogue, but I thought it was really a really flimsy reasoning, and yeah, it's just that was kind of dumb. But at that point, I just kind of had to tell myself, okay, based on a comic book, so just whatever.
Oh, there much for any complaint you have about the MCU or any video game, I will point you to almost 100 years now of terrible, dumb comics.
Mm, no, for a video game based on a comic book, it was fantastic. It was a lot better than I expected it to be. I
I
thought
I
it'd be
will go
good.
on record as saying it was better than the Avengers game, which I also like.
I don't think that's I don't think you're really putting yourself too far out there making
For
that
me, for
making that
me, I
claim.
am. I defend the Avengers all day long.
I know.
I will. I can do this all day. I can defend games you don't like.
I know. I listened to that show with your brother too. I know you liked it, and I liked some things about it too. But this game definitely was better than that.
Way better. Another game we briefly talked about last time we recorded was I was really holding back because you hadn't touched it at all at that point. It was Deathloop, and you finally beat it recently, right?
Just a couple weeks ago.
Now I said it was my This seems derisive to say default game of the year, but 2021 wasn't like the brightest of roses for a year. There was a lot of really solid stuff, and some stuff is like, who the fuck thought Returnal was worth game of the year? But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, a lot of stuff got pushed
What
into
did you
this
think of
year.
Deathloop?
So.
Yes, that's true.
What did I think of Deathloop? I thought it was fantastic.
Yes.
I did. I think I told you this right after I beat it. I think it's probably Arkane Studios' best game, and that's saying something.
The people who made Prey and the Dishonored games. Yes.
Yeah, I really love the Dishonored games. I think they're peak stealth gameplay, but in Prey, I also really enjoyed. I thought there was some really creative things that game did. The way you could with the powers and interact with the and environmental hazards and whatnot. But I thought it was just a little, a little flawed for various reasons. But I thought Deathloop was just kind of the perfect mix of action and gameplay, and just the most character development in any of the Arkane games as well.
Oh, for sure. My theory is that they hired new writers who'd never played any of their previous games, where there's barely any talking, because there's a lot of dialogue in Deathloop.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, if they got some other writers in there, because especially with Colt and Juliana's, I guess, relationship, if you want to call it.
The banter between
Yeah,
each other,
the
yes.
banter. It's a big part of the game, and because every time you're going in and out of an area or something major happens in the story, then yeah, she calls you just to be a constant nuisance, and she will actually pop up in your game and be an actual physical nuisance. So it always felt like, yeah, they had a really good rivalry going on, a nice rapport going on, that was really
Mm-hmm.
fun. But yeah, I loved a lot of things about this. I'm a big sucker for 60s retro. Although this game
Yeah, the aesthetic was very like England in the '60s
yeah,
style, even though no one's
yes,
British.
yeah, yeah, that is kind of odd there. Even has I think Updom might be a
Yeah, that's a
yeah, that's
place in
actually a
England.
district. So,
Yeah.
and but it was kind of funny because the soundtrack reminded me more 70s rock jazz fusion sort of deal. It obviously it,
I won't claim to be an expert.
I'm not either, and there's some overlap of genres. There's a lot of blending in with different of the instrumentals and whatnot. But oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but the soundtrack was so smooth. It was fantastic. It's one of those. I just even the just kind of the ambient music that would play in the background, I really started to enjoy, and I've
Mm-hmm.
actually started. There'd be times where I'll just listen to it when I'm just doing something else. It's really relaxing and smooth, and I love it. And very reminded me kind of like I was playing a James Bond game at times. It was I felt very cool, like I was in one big ad for a cigarette company or something like that, from the 50s.
Well, for the most, I don't know how you played specifically, but you're not supposed to, quote unquote, play this game very stealthily, but you can, and I certainly did for most of my playthrough. So the whole sneaking thing, there's a lot of background going around. You're going past eternal, the NPCs who are just having inane conversations with each other or whatever, and so you're hearing this music, and the aesthetic sort of leans into that James Bond spy. I don't want to say Austin Powersy, but almost.
Yeah, and by James Bond style, I don't mean necessarily that he's an international man of mystery and whatnot. I kind of before I played the game, had already decided I was just going to be stealthy at certain times, but if shit hit the fan, I was just going to go full balls to the wall. There wasn't going to be any of
Hmm.
this like Dishonored or Hitman where I'm constantly reloading if one guy spots my shoe or some shit like that.
Well, mostly because you can't.
No, yeah, there's no actual manual saving or loading in this game, so it was made it a lot easier just by taking that decision out of my hand.
Yeah.
And I really liked that way of playing. It was cool just going around hearing the enemies, the regular schmoes, the Eternalists, I believe they're called, just kind of have their own banter going back and forth, which some of it was actually
Hmm.
pretty amusing, and there's also some pretty enlightening stuff that actually helps you in your quest, your objectives to take out all the leaders.
Oh yeah, they'll say, "Hey, are you guarding that place over there later?" No, I'm guarding over here later. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yes, it's all very like movie stereotypical cliches, like talking way too loud to be about sensitive information and whatnot. But that's a big part of this game is just going around doing recon and collecting information
Yeah.
on all your targets and how best to complete your objectives and break the loop.
As opposed to something like, for the most part, Dishonored and Prey series, everything is told to you through pieces of paper you pick up or, audio dialogues you find. There really aren't that many NPCs in Dishonored or Prey, or certainly that you're not, there to kill or, stun, whatever the case may have you. So, because you're a character that's fully voiced and you're interacting with other characters that have a lot of dialogue, and all of your targets are their own character who sometimes have a lot and sometimes a very, I say insular, but quiet about themselves. But as I was trying to say at the beginning, is like it's got absolutely the most personality of any Arkane game, not just in aesthetic but in audio design for sure.
Yeah, they hit it out of the park with sound design for sure. I especially I think the guns, I think they all sound fantastic. The hand cannon, the 4 pounder, sounded like an actual cannon going off. When I first shot one, I was wearing headsets to max volume, and they made my ears hurt. And I went, holy shit, that's awesome.
There goes that stealth playthrough.
Yeah, pretty much. But everything everything about the concept of the game was leading up to its release was kind of ambiguous because we talked about this the other day when we were planning the show. There was a lot of
Mm.
trailers in the months leading up to this game, and I think it got delayed a couple times, at least once.
I believe it got delayed a full year.
That sounds about right. And it seemed like there was a trailer playing at every single PlayStation show access, and they were all pretty much the same. Didn't really give away too much, which that's that's I like that about trailers. I don't want them showing a whole lot, but when they're playing that many trailers and explaining very little, it kind of, I don't want to say put me off the game, but kind of left me confused on what it was all about. And but they tell you the general premise in that there's
Mm-hmm.
there's an endless loop going. It's the same day over and over again. In order to break it, you have to kill these 8 leaders, these visionaries. Now, which is, yeah, that's true. That's basically the main objective of the game. But what the promo material never explained was the world itself. Like, what kind of, was it a big open world? And that's honestly kind of what I assumed it would be. Um,
Yeah, me too.
but it's not. It's actually it's 4 big maps that you can go to. You can explore at different times of the day, and a lot of things changes them. Some of them feel almost completely different depending on the time of day.
So basically, because there's 4 times a day, so it's really like 16 maps, but they're not all like huge. I can only think of like one really big map.
No, they feel big when you're starting off and you're going slow and you're just trying to kind of consume as much information as you can and just gather all the intel you possibly can about your targets. But after that,
Mm.
when you start getting into the rhythm and flow of the game and knowing exactly where you need to go, what you need to do, then yeah, they start feeling a little bit smaller. But they were all the maps were all very very well designed. I think there was, it reminded me of, uh, calling back to Deus Ex again, of that game, of a game like that, and like Dishonored, where there's so many points of ingress and just so many
Oh yeah,
entries and so many escape points. And I know I didn't discover all of them, even in the 40, 50 hours I played this game. And
I had a favorite route at the nighttime one where you go to the party where you go all like you take the longest, most circuitous route around, but no one sees you. It takes fucking forever to get there, but no one ever spotted me getting there. That was my favorite route.
yeah, and I had my own too. I would get into the complex and then kind of cut across and get into one of the target's room, and there's relevant information in there to take him out. And I always liked doing that. Although even though it was my preferred route, I don't know if it was the best one because I never got in and out of that party without getting caught. So maybe I should have done a little bit more exploring. But
uh, on that instance, something you're saying earlier, it's like, as opposed to, this is the last time I'll mention this, but as opposed to something like Returnal, which is it's also a time loop, but it's more of a roguelike because the different genre of game, I understand, is not a great comparison. But every time you play Returnal, something different happens. Every time you play Deathloop, the same thing happens every single day. No matter where you go, the NPCs are always going to be in the same spot. Your targets are always going to be doing the exact same things at the time you go there. So really, the only variable is what you do. And in discovering the influence you can have on later in the day, depending on what you do in the morning, is more limited than maybe what we expected, whether or not we should have expected it from the trailers. It's interesting discovering it's like, oh, all I have to do is move this, piece of paper over here, and something different will happen later in the day. The key difference being that you have to move that piece of paper every single day in order to have the thing that happens later happen. If I hope that sentence made sense.
yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that happens off screen when you discover a important piece of info or some way to take out your target. And it's kind of like one of those things like, okay, you've done this, so don't worry, you don't have to keep doing this over and over again. In fact, I think the only time that you like there's only when you create the perfect or when you discover the perfect scenario to take out all targets, because there is only one, which was also kind of, I don't know, disappointing to me, but it wasn't that big deal.
Understandably disappointing. I know why they did it.
Yeah. But there's really only like two minor things that you have to do. You have to sabotage the fireworks, so Frank blows himself up at the party, and then you gotta mess around with Igor's device so that he ends up at the party. But other than that, there's just kind of a lot of there's once you discover something or do something the first time, the game says, okay, don't worry, you don't have to do this over again every single time, because that would just be a pain in the ass and bad game design. So when I realized the game was segmented in just 4 big maps and not just one big overworld map with everything, all these moving parts and whatnot, I was a little disappointed. But when I thought about it afterwards, I understood why they couldn't do that, because as far as I know, Arkane hasn't had just one seamless open world game. They've all been like this.
No,
They've
not
all
yet.
been like this. They've all just been big, detailed maps with just a lot of places go in and out, and on all these different.
They're very dense maps. A lot of open world games we get, there's nothing there. It's a big world, there's nothing in it. Arkane games have stuff in their maps.
There's a lot of things in the environment to interact with. So it does really just kind of bog down with a bunch of assets, and I completely understand why they couldn't make it a big open world game. Well, I don't want to say can't, but I understand why they chose to go this route. Ultimately,
Yes.
I think it ended up working pretty well.
This isn't like the most ambitious game we've ever discussed on this, but it's fairly ambitious, and I understand. It's like, okay, I get why this was delayed, and I get why you keep showing trailers, and I get why you're very hush hush about the whole thing. In the playing of it's like, oh, I understand now why you couldn't tell us all the secrets, because we needed to discover those secrets for a reason, on our own, on purpose, in the narrative.
Yeah, the game is pretty much it's like a big puzzle that you're just trying to put
Yes,
together, and
absolutely.
sometimes you don't know that the pieces fit together until you put them together, and then you say, oh, look, it's a dog. Okay, the dog goes next to, yes,
Oh, the
exactly,
sailboat.
that goes next to into the water. And if you're like me, there's probably a bunch of other pieces to the puzzle you just didn't use, but you got enough to make the bigger picture, so that's good enough.
Yeah, there's a bunch of like gun quests, like getting different guns from the different vision areas, or like that box quest for the radio things. I just like, I don't want to say ignored, but it was a rental for me at the time. So I was like, well, I kind of need to get back to the main quest here.
I think I got most of the legendary guns. Some of them are easy. Some of them, like, you only have to kill a visionary and grab it off their dead body.
Yeah, my issue with stuff like that is you can carry three weapons, and that's it. So I was like, I'm gonna go out of my way for this sort of thing.
Yeah, but you can infuse those weapons and then keep them for forever. But the thing is, you can't switch between your weapons while you're in the same day. You can only change out your loadout at the beginning of a day, which it took me a little bit to understand that and figure that out. But once I did, it was nice because then I could just, if I found a gun I liked, I can just throw a weapon that I had already infused away, and then pick up the new weapon, and then my old weapon would still be, in my inventory in the next game.
Be there waiting for you the next
Exactly, yeah.
morning. Yeah.
Although there was one I had, I think, just one bug in this game, besides just the occasional amusing graphical glitch where someone would just go flying off into space, or, well, not into space, but there'd be some textures pop in and out, and nothing too major. But one thing was one bug that I had was kind of weird. Was I had a slab upgrade, which are your powers in this game, and you can infuse. You get these upgrades by killing the visionaries over and over again and getting the power ups, and you can infuse them to save them for another day. And there was one time where I did this with a certain upgrade, and I didn't have it the next day. My power just had no upgrades when the previous day I had two.
I think the same thing happened to me.
Oh, really? Yeah, I read about it. It sounded like a fairly commonplace bug, and like we just said earlier, you can't manually load in this game, so I just kind of had to keep going, and I figured I lost those upgrades, but then I went through that whole game day, and then went to the next one, and the upgrades are back. So it kind of fixed itself, and I never had that
Huh.
issue again. It was very strange, but other than that, it was pretty technically sound game, and it had the classic Arkane graphic style, art design, kind of the
Like not like cartoon people, but pretty close to cartoony people.
yeah, kind of sort of claymation-y, but not like Team Fortress. But
That's very weird. That's very hard to
yeah, it
describe.
kind of is. It's not cell shaded. It's not pure.
Yeah. But they've all been like if you look at the characters from Dishonored or Prey, the NPCs, it's like they all look a certain way, just off, but purposefully off. Like that's the art style that they use. The faces are wider and bigger for more
Yeah,
expression, I
no,
guess.
they yeah, the style is it's not extremely detailed, and like all Arcane games are, but the art design is so good. I think it just doesn't matter. They were able to pull it off. So
I don't know if we'll have time for a Nintendo discussion, but a lot of times in modern video game discourse, you see it's like, graphics above all. And we've been hearing this stupid ass thing for almost 30 years now. It's like, art design is a huge fucking important thing. It's like, it doesn't matter if this game is gorgeous if there's nothing to look at beyond the gorgeousness of it. It's like, I've played many beautiful, aesthetically ugly games. It's because, they put work into the environment. There's parts of the game that actually matter. No, in Deathloop, not at any point can you step on a bush and the bush bends realistically. That does not happen. I guarantee you that. Because the developers didn't fucking waste their time with stupid shit like that.
yeah, that kind of stuff. It's nice, but it's not something I'm going to. I don't know. I may notice it, but it's going to be one of those things where I just go, huh, okay, that's neat. It's not
Then at that point, it's
it's
needless.
not really going to impact my feelings on the game and whatnot. It's just, yeah, it's just something. It's just something that they add in. But
Well, it's the argument with the exclusives because during the development cycle of this game, Microsoft flat out bought all Bethesda properties. So this was going to be, what still technically is, a PlayStation 5 exclusive and PC. We all assume Deathloop is eventually going to come to the Xbox system sometime in 2022, maybe 23. We don't actually know because Sony's been kind of playing fast and loose with these exclusives in terms of how long they're allowed to to keep. Like the next game from Bethesda, technically from Bethesda, is Ghostwire Tokyo from Tango Gameworks, the people who made the Evil Within series, and that's a PlayStation 5 exclusive for a while because it is Bethesda and Xbox owns them. We assume it will eventually come to Xbox, but we don't actually know.
Yeah, they probably will. I'm guessing. I'm sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, they were always gonna be timed exclusives. Just Sony, whenever the contract expires, I'm sure they won't. Obviously, since Microsoft owns Bethesda, it's not like Sony will be able to enter a new contract in with Bethesda. So
Yeah, like they did with Final Fantasy VII. Yeah.
yeah, whereas if they just bought Square Enix a long time ago, wouldn't have to worry about that. So they just I'm gonna edit my own stuff.
Fuck the last 10 minutes. Uh, Deathloop, great game.
Yeah, play it. Go ahead. Good stuff.
If you have a PlayStation,
Yeah, or an
if you have
Xbox
an
in a year or
Xbox
two.
only, you're gonna have to wait. If you have a high-end PC, which neither of us have, man, if we had high-end PCs, the games we could be playing,
They'd be the same games. They'd just be slightly better looking.
and run better. Let's be real here, and have mods.
Yeah, mods are nice.
We got time for Yakuza.
Yeah. And that was also the games I played up. And since the last time we did a show, I ended
Right.
up finishing Yakuza 4, even though I started it last year, and ended up blowing through Yakuza 5 and 6.
Which amazes me because those are longer than 4.
5 was, 6 was, I think I got done in like 33 hours. But
Hmm. Well, you do a lot more side content than I do, for
I
sure.
do, I do, I do quite a few of the sub stories, because I think most of them are pretty well done, pretty funny. That's where a lot of humor of the Yakuza series comes from.
Oh, certainly, certainly. It's a very serious crime game, and the side stories are goofy shit.
Yeah, it's always been a fun little balance shifting between those two.
Hmm. I'll look at a sub story like, oh, Game Facts or whatever, and it's like, okay, how long is this going to take? Is this going to be a fetch quest? Am I going to have to win? Am I going to just punch a guy and be over with? Okay, then I'll do it. But it's like I'm not going to 100% any of these games because they're just too big and there's too much things. Have you ever 100% any of these games?
No, because I think that would require a new game plus, and I haven't done a second playthrough of any of the Yakuza series, even though I
Yeah. I mean,
love them all. Yeah,
they're all great, but if you don't know, it's like it's unfair to call it Japanese Grand Theft Auto because it isn't. But it's the easiest explanation. You're for all intents and purposes a criminal who's getting out of a life or whatever, and then they pull you back in. But it doesn't play like any Western game really because it is a third-person brawler. You go the way you interact with the game is mostly through street fights. But that's not a good enough descriptor. I only played the first one because it was on PS Plus. I knew of its existence, and I've been ignoring it my entire life. And the first one, Yakuza Kiwami, was on PS Plus on PS4, so it was free. And I tried it out, and I was like, "Wow, this game's fucking amazing! Why have I never tried this before?" So I very quickly got into the rest of the series, 0 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And that zombie one I have, but I never actually played. So, and then you were a little bit ahead of me, a little bit behind me, or whatever. But you've played all the mainline Yakuza games now, starring Kiryu Kazuma.
yeah. No, I just finished up Kiryu's saga just earlier today. In fact, I beat Yakuza 6, and
The
yeah, it's
Song
a
of
solid one.
Life, and the song is very
It is
bittersweet.
very sweet. It seems like the latter the Yakuza main series have all had themes where
Mm-hmm.
4 was kind of about like loyalty because there's a lot of betrayals. There's a lot of betrayals in most of the Yakuza games, but they really seem just amp it up from 4 on.
Well, it's a plot hook. It's like, I thought you were my brother. Ha, I'm not. I did it for all the money, the yen.
Yeah, it's almost like they need to constantly remind you that yes, Yakuza are criminals, and criminals are inherently selfish. That's why they're criminals.
Only during one of these games are you actually technically playing someone in the Yakuza at the time.
Yeah, even though the game is called Yakuza and Kiryu is a Yakuza, he's the worst Yakuza of all time. Because most of the time, he's not breaking the law or doing anything like that. He's just going around beating up people or starting fights with them and helping people with their just inane tasks. And then the latter half of the series, he's not even in the clan anymore, and he's just retired. But like you said, he keeps getting pulled back in by shenanigans.
Well, like he's friends with a lot of morons, and like Kiryu himself is like he's not world wise, but he's not stupid. He's not an idiot by any means. You know, he never does something really stupid, but he's friends with a lot of people who are really stupid. And so they'll do something dumb, and he'll be like, "Kiryu, please bail me out of this." And he's like, "No, bail this out of yourself." He's like, "Oh fuck, I feel guilty about it. I guess I'll bail you out of it." There's an endearingness to him. There's a certainly loyalty in Kiryu. Kiryu is the most loyal dude ever to everyone, even people who've betrayed him. He's loyal to.
Yeah, no, he definitely puts a lot of importance on the bonds between friends and family members, even if they're not bound by blood, which is also kind of a theme in 6, where it's all these family bonds, these fathers and sons that are just have these terrible relationships, and they all just kind of get to the point in different ways. They all have different things, different secrets they're hiding, or different values that they uphold.
I, I say I say earlier that everyone's being stupid, but really everyone does things for their own reason, and they are eventually told to you. It's like, even Nijima way back in, is it Nijima? That's not Nijima. Nikishima. Way back in 1 and 0, the original betrayal. It's like, man, this guy's such a dumbass, but if you look at it from his perspective, it's like he did what he had to do to get to the top of, to get to be the chairman
Yeah,
of the Yakuza.
he was a great Yakuza because he broke the law.
Yeah. Yes, he was a hardcore criminal, like most of the people you associate with.
He was a selfish asshole. That's how he was able to advance so far. And it's yeah, he does some really shady things with Kiryu not around. But it is his fault Kiryu's there to begin with. Man, I always wondered because it's really hard in as an artist with game series and TV series and even novels and whatnot. You can't really plan for your series to be popular and to have this.
You hope, but never
Yes,
expect.
yeah,
Yes.
and you can't really plan it that way because all the Yakuza games they're pretty insular. They're all very self-contained for the most part. Because there are a lot of characters that I've in previous games that I wish were still in the series. I like Nishiki. I
Hmm.
kind of wish he would had made it a little farther. Uh, I kind of see why they because at that point they were just on two different sides and they couldn't compromise. But I think it kind of hurt them in the later games because then they just had to, I don't know, kind of shoe in these new bad guys who just,
Yeah, well, there's a lot of power vacuums.
yeah, it's constantly okay. Oh, the Tojo goes to war with either one of the Yakuza clans or some overseas mafia, and then Kiryu cleans up the mess, and then he promises to support Daigo, and Majima says the same thing, but then the next game comes around, something happens to Daigo or Majima or whatever, and then these assholes in the Tojo start messing things up again, and then it's just rinse and repeat after that, and it got very old after a while, and it's man, Yakuza 5. Okay, say what you want about 3, but the main antagonist in that, I think his name was Mine. He was another, he's another just Tojo asshole that took advantage of a vacuum and
everybody's just constantly looking for an excuse to go to war. It's like, oh, our patriarch looked the other way. Let's go to war.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Say what you will about him, you can kind of understand his motivations and see how he made his rise. But then you go to Yakuza 5, and then they have this stupid twist that this dumb meathead that you meet, and he's this this superfluous character who's the bodyguard of Daigo. He's not even in half the game, and then all of a sudden, oh, he's the main bad guy. Like, what the fuck is this? It's so it's
They pull off that early Final Fantasy trick a lot. Of the final boss is a guy you've never heard of.
well, this was almost even worse because this guy you do hear of, but he's not in the game for half of it, and the parts he's in it, he's a nobody. He's not an important character at all. And then he kills this other character off screen, and that's supposed to be your motivation to kick the shit out of him and bring him back towards the light or something and be a real Yakuza. One that just goes around fighting all the time and not making money.
So there's I don't want to say pervasive idea, but if you're on the outside looking in, you hear us talking about the Yakuza, like we're talking about Grand Theft Auto, like all you play is a criminal and it's all glorifying crime. It's like, it's really not. It's showing the consequences for living lives like this. It's like, if you constantly betray someone, at some point you're going to be betrayed. If you lie and cheat and steal, someone's going to lie to you, cheat you, and steal from you. It seems roundabout because it is, I think. I don't know if that's the purpose they're making or they're just trying to make a fucking video game and they need an antagonist.
I think it's a little column A, column B, because it is, at least in the Kiryu saga, it is 7 games, including a prequel, so it's gonna have its highs and lows, for sure.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think they do kind of they want to express how shitty being a Yakuza is, and how you're stuck in this underworld with all these other terrible people that'll stab you in the back as soon as look at you. And but I always kind of feel like a hypocrite because I do love this series, and I love that message they do convey. But I've always kind of hated the Godfather series because it always seemed like it romanticizes that Italian mafia lifestyle.
Hmm.
But
It doesn't show enough of the lows. Like, Yakuza series shows a lot of the lows. It's like you work for or used to work for some really terrible people who do terrible things. You're like, fuck, you're awful. And Godfather, you never feel like, yeah, they murder people, but they're the good guys. They're the good murderers. It's like The Sopranos. It's the same shit.
yeah, in Yakuza, you don't see any benefit for Kiryu. There's no net gain for him whatsoever, and
Hmm.
because what little money he's able to scrape up is, either is just something you just gain through gameplay, and it doesn't add to his personal wealth in the story, or he loses it, so
Right.
it doesn't matter anyways. Whereas Godfather, you just see them in their multi-million-dollar mansions with the throwing these lavish parties and whatnot. But occasionally might wake up next to a horse's head, but it's no big deal. So I think in that regard, I think Yakuza, yeah, conveys the just how terrible that just being in that lifestyle is. And I've always, God, I need to, I want to look up if there's a documentary or interview with an actual Yakuza who's played a little, played some of the game, and just kind of see their reactions
I'm sure. Yeah.
on what they, if it's really like that or what they think of it.
I mean, there is a sort of, I don't want to seem vaguely racist about this sort of thing, but it's a uniquely Japanese thing. There is a lot of honor code embedded into it. Even to the whole, if you commit a sin in the family, so to speak, you have to cut off your pinky. It's like, well, what the fuck does that mean? Oh, because when Japanese people used to have swords all the time, the thing for balancing was your pinky, and now you can't hold a sword anymore. So this is dishonorable to you.
Hmm.
Even though it's when the game takes place at 2015, who uses swords?
Yeah, yeah. Except in this game when they, random guy on the street pop up with one. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it
Well,
was.
in gameplay, yes, but
Yeah,
yes.
it was meant to be the ultimate sacrifice and dishonor for a warrior, and to, yeah, basically pronounce to the world that they are no longer a fighter. They are no longer samurai or what have you. it is. And so I don't sound vaguely racist because I am just an outsider looking in, and of my years of anime and video game consumption, I like to think I have learned a little something about Japanese culture. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but the Yakuza they do seem kind of like an institution. They're kind of sort of
Mm.
maybe not a necessary evil, but an accepted one, if you will, over in that society. Because even in the games, you kind of get that sense where there's obviously they're not friends with the police or anything like that, but there's a sort of mutual respect or at least an understanding between the two entities.
Well, a large part of it is something that the games don't really cover, and I realize again this is another thing, but gameplay versus real life. But there are a lot less guns in Japan than there are in America. So by virtue of that, there's a lot less gun crime. So the kind of crime, even though criminals are all the same all over the world, the kind of crime in Japan isn't the same as the kind of crime in the U.S.
Yeah, there's a lot fewer chances of escalation over there.
Yeah,
Um, but it's not like people don't get murdered over there, and and
I
and they're
mean it's still
still
bad, but
and they're still
it's
criminals. They're gonna find
mhm.
firearms whether they have to ship them in overseas or what. They're still gonna find some way to subvert the law and all that. But I think also another way there another reason why there's kind of a I'm trying to find a better word than understanding between police and yakuza, but is because the Japanese they're very enclosed society and they're very proud.
Mhm.
And if there's any outside influence, like say an overseas gang from mainland Asia, then even the yakuza will step up and defend their home and their territory and whatnot. So that maybe that garners a little bit respect in kind of the public eye, or makes them tolerated a little bit more. I don't know. It's just we're just kind of going off the
Well,
cuff here with all
I
this.
think it is fair to say for I think it is fair to say for both of us that we have a much I don't know appreciation, but certainly deeper understanding of Japanese life. Like, there's no other games like the Yakuza series that you could play. You can play whatever otame, visual novel. You can play a lot of, Senran Kagura boob games, whatever. But you don't understand the day-to-day life of a Japanese citizen until you play something like Yakuza, where you're dealing with a different country's culture. I've never experienced a series that exposes me like this. Even other Japanese studios is like, well, we're making this for a Western audience. Yakuza isn't for a Western audience. It's just translated for a Western audience.
No, yeah, and it's still Japanese and English. It's pretty much impossible to do a one-to-one conversion translation ratio. There's gonna be there's a lot of phrases and
Nuance.
nuances in the Japanese language that just don't translate well to English, and even my extremely limited knowledge of the language, I can pick up sometimes where Japanese voice actor is saying one thing where it may be the same word, but it may be totally different just based on the context of the conversation and whatnot. So it's almost like I don't know if they would describe it as such, but it's almost like a slice of life sort of sort of deal because, like you said, you do learn a lot about just kind of the day to day Japanese lifestyle that you
Mhm.
wouldn't get from the anime games.
Well, if you want to learn what it's like to be a Japanese high schooler, you can play the Persona series. If you want to learn what it's like to be a Japanese adult, you play the Yakuza
That's a
series.
good way to put it. Yeah.
Both published by Sega. What do you know? A Japanese
Yeah.
company.
And I'm really glad I got into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really ended up really enjoying Kiryu Saga, and I'm glad they're finally going away because I think it was time. I love them
7 games and plus a zombie game.
exactly,
Yeah.
but
Uh,
I am still glad that they're gonna stay in Kamurocho with the new this like a dragon, the new RPG style game.
oh, actually, like a dragon, you're in Yokohama.
Oh really? Okay, I didn't know that. All right. Well,
Yep, you spend most of the game there. It's like 4 and 5 where you go back and forth
hmm.
eventually.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. Well, there's also Judgment too, which I think.
Yes, there have in fact two spin-offs from this series, the Judgment series, which is 2 games now, and that's where they're going to keep allegedly the
Hmm.
brawling style if you get into a street
Yeah.
fight every 2 minutes, and they want to split off into an RPG style. And what I've been playing this week is Yakuza Like a Dragon, which was for a while called Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon, and then they just dropped the 7 because it has nothing to do with it other than it takes place in the same country with the same, the Tojo clan, the Omi Alliance is still a thing. You just don't have any interaction with anyone from any of the previous games. The
Yeah.
same for Judgment.
No, and yeah, like I said, I'm glad they're still staying in that modern day Japan, and they're also trying something new with this RPG
Yes.
mechanics, and even with Judgment, even though it's still a brawler beat 'em up like Yakuza, Yagami plays completely different to Kiryu, and they also add a lot more different interactions and mini games and side quests and that. So yeah,
Now, all those good things being said, there's some shit in these games I just cannot tolerate. Like management. There's so many forced minigame management. Oh no, Kiryu has to manage a cabaret club. Oh no, for some ass reason, Yagami has to manage a cabaret club. Oh no, what's his fucking name? The guy with the mauve suit has to manage a cabaret club. Oh, we gotta check the finances. Oh, let's play the real estate game. Oh, kart racing, shogi. It's like,
they
there's so much fucking mini games. I was like, oh my god, I just want to get back to the game,
they love their
please.
mini games,
There's
and
so
I
much.
I like them for the most part, but I just dip my toes in for the most part and I don't really. It depends on kind of how I'm feeling. It's funny because when I was playing Kiwami 2, which also goes off the same engine as 6, and I think any of the more recent games, in that game 2, I ended up doing the Cabaret Club storyline the whole way, and I just completely ignored the clan creator content. Whereas in 6, I did all the clan creator content, but didn't go to the cabaret clubs. So, but it doesn't have the 6 doesn't have the management, the club management mini game. You just
Was it? They brought back a man. I don't remember which one it is. I don't remember if it's in 5 or one of the previous ones. Where there's ones where you own a business and you have to like make sure your business is. This is in Like a Dragon, and you manage the business and hire people and fire people and like give shareholder meetings. Like, what the hell is this? This is really a fucking video game. Why am I giving shareholders meetings? And later on in this game, I will in fact go down into a dungeon and beat a man near death with a baseball bat.
it's great. I can't wait. I just I
Oh, it is. It is not to big it up too much because I know you just finished 6, but Like a Dragon is really good. I can't say it's because I haven't finished it yet. I'm almost halfway. Switching to an RPG was the best thing they ever did. Now you get in the same amount of fights. The fights take just as long, but just the idea that it's a different kind of game. It's changed genres. It's a turn-based Dragon Quest style RPG, and I love turn-based RPGs. That's literally my favorite kind of RPG of the two kinds that there are.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I probably won't play it right away. I think I'm like I said, I blew through 4, 5, and 6, so that's hundreds of hours of Yakuza content that I think I'm just gonna need a little breather.
I need a break from the
Yes,
Japanese
yeah,
lifestyle.
yeah, but I'm looking forward to it. That's for sure.
I had more planned, but I don't want to go too long. Not because it's difficult to listen to, because it's difficult for me to edit, and that's the real reason I want to keep these shorter. But what are you gonna
That's
do?
why I spaced these episodes out so far. I'm doing you a favor, Loki. What
How many times have I
you
said
didn't
that to
buy that?
you? How many times have I said I'm doing you a favor when I'm not really doing you a
Yeah, well,
favor?
I thought it was a good chance to kind of turn your words around on you.
How dare you use what I said against me?
I've been doing it to my parents for all my life when I was growing up.
Thank you so much for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Stizzy, thanks once again for being
Well,
on.
thank you for having me on.
Well, See you again next month when you play like 5 more games in a row.
Yeah, it may not be that long. Who knows? But we'll see you.
You could find me on the Twitterverse at Loki Jarson. The website is www.internetsworst.com. I'm on iTunes and Spotify and probably Stitcher. I don't know how Stitcher works, but we're probably there. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Yes. See ya.